So the last thing I'd like to talk about today is money in the Victorian system, because it was quite different than the monetary system that exists today in Britain. If you want more, of course, I strongly encourage you to read the entire chapter. I'm just mentioning some of the factual information that Sally Mitchell enumerates in her book. The book is very interesting, and I would say it's not very hard to read, and I guess it will give you some useful practical skills, like being able to evaluate costume films. So, like all the physical reality of life being described in the film. So, this is what I would like you to do. I will also leave you. I will send you the links to some short, and this time really short, videos by the British Library, uploaded by the British Library, about life in the 19th century. And the one I would especially like you to see is a short, it's like 8 minutes, part called The Middle Classes. It shows you some illustrations, it shows you a very famous image in which the British society is compared to a beehive, with everybody, all the professions, doing the little bit for the common good. There is another part on gender issues and another part on the governess. We'll talk about these things slightly later stage. But what I would like to talk about now, to sum up the thing about the classes, it's money. I'm not sure you know that the decimal monetary system was introduced in Britain only in it's not a mistake, 1971. 1971. Before that, they had a non-decimal system that would be more familiar to the Victorians. So rather than having £1, which was worth 100 pence, they had like a triple system. So a penny was a large copper coin. It was 1. Then 12 pence, the plural of penny is pence. 12 pence constituted 1 shilling, and the shilling was a silver coin. And 20 shillings, yes, it's not decimal, 20 shillings made up a pound. So it was like the pound, the shilling, and the pence. And the pound was a gold coin. So you can imagine that a Victorian pound, £1, was much more valuable than a British pound today. Some scholars say, of course it would differ from year to year, but on average, if you want to compare the value of the Victorian pound to the current pound, to the pound nowadays, it would be around more or less 50. So 50 pounds today would only make 1 Victorian pound, which was a gold coin. It was generally assumed that if you earned £1 a week, this could sustain you. So the poverty line that could really put you in physical danger of malnutrition and homelessness and such things was around slightly less than £1 a week. If you earned £1 a week, you were safe. Not wealthy, but generally safe. There were more coins in operation than there are today. Some of them were even older than the Victorian system. So, for example, there was a guinea. A guinea was an old coin. It was not minted after the end of Napoleonic Wars. it was worth 21 shillings. So like £1 plus 1 shilling. It was sometimes still used, but only, as you can imagine, was a very valuable coin for luxury goods. So this was the old coin. The smallest coin in operation was called a farthing. A farthing was worth 1/4 of a penny. So you can imagine that this money was worth quite a lot. Even 1 pence could be further divided. There was a halfpenny coin, then there was a penny coin, then 2 pence, 3 pence. There was a 4 pence coin called a groat. Then there was a 6 pence, so like half a shilling, because a shilling was 12 pence. Then there was a coin called a florin, which was worth 2 shillings. Then a half crown, which was worth 2 shillings and 6 pence. And a crown worth 5 shillings. And a double florin worth 4 shillings. There is a list in the book. Don't try to memorize it. I'm reading from the book, so compare the book. Then there was a half sovereign, which was 1/2 of a pound, so 10 shillings, and a sovereign, which means a £1 coin, plus this guinea, the old coin worth £1 and 1 shilling. So as you can see, there were all different kinds and worth of coins in operation. There was almost no paper money. That is why they had so many different coins. Almost all money circulated in forms of coins. The banknotes were known, but they were only beginning to be used. They were issued by individual banks. They were not really safe, because if the bank went bankrupt, and it happened, it wasn't like an unimaginable occurrence. The banknotes became worthless, so nobody really wanted to keep them. So if people wanted to save up some money, they would normally save up coins, gold coins, if they could afford them. So if there was a fortune gathered, this was normally this consisted of gold coins, even in large amounts. So that's one interesting thing. Also, Sally Mitchell gives a long list of average prices, some sample prices of things, like what was expensive and what was cheap, and how the prices changed. So for example, if we look at the price of a loaf of bread, a big loaf of bread, which would be like over 4 pounds in weight, so like more than 2 kilograms. In the 1840s, so the Hungry 40s, it cost 8.5 pence, and by the end of the 19th century it cost 5 pence, so the price went down. The reason was the lift on the import tax on American grain. So flour and baking became cheaper. This was a deliberate move to help the poor who are starving, to cut the cost of the food. You have all kinds of foodstuffs here, and clothes and such things. For example, a ready-made woman's suit. So late 19th century, when such things became fashionable, cost around £1. So it was quite expensive, but not horribly expensive. Of course, all those made-to-measure ball dresses could be much more expensive. A working man's shirt could be bought for 1 shilling and 4 pence, so much cheaper. An interesting thing is are the prices for public transport. So, for example, the price of a cab, so like a taxi, depended on the distance, of course, and it was usually 1 shilling for any distance under 2 miles, and an additional 6 pence for every mile thereafter. However, when the underground was introduced, one of the ways to encourage the people to use the underground, and we are talking about the mid-19th century, was to have a flat fare of 1 penny regardless of the length of the journey. So as you can see, it was really cheap and dependable, and much more available to common people than the cabs. What else? Books were expensive, apparently. A new hardbound novel in 3 volumes, like all those big Victorian novels, they were usually 3-deckers, they were usually 3-volume editions, cost 31 shillings and a 6 pence. So more than an inexpensive woman's dress or a second-hand bicycle, Sally Mitchell says. So owning a book was really a mark of status, and if you had a big library, this was an important mark of status as well. And that is the reason why so many novelists, including Charles Dickens, first issued their books in paper-covered installments. So, like in episodes, those monthly installments could be bought for 1 shilling. So you had 1 episode of a book for 1 shilling. The entire thing, as you can see, 31 plus a 6 pence. So that was why those novels were so popular among the middle class, and why so many people started using libraries, because it was cheaper. Even if these were private libraries and you paid an entrance fee, it was of course much more affordable than to have your own copy of a book. Daily newspapers sold for 7 pence early in the period. Then the prices fell down sharply to 1 pence, and then at the end of the Victorian period to half penny for a newspaper. Of course, again, to encourage people to read. Even the working class start reading towards the end of the 19th century. The last thing on the list, there are more, I'm not reading all of it, so absolutely go and see for yourself. The cost of an adult burial, even at the most minimal standard, was between 4 and 5 pounds. So 4 or 5 these gold coins. So this was an expensive thing, but as you will know soon enough, this was a very important social practice, and even the poor tried to find the money, to economize or to borrow the money or to use any kind of savings groups to have the money for a burial when the opportunity, when the situation demanded it. How much people earned, it really depends. So, for example, the lowest ranking people, like domestic servants and needle workers and low ranking shop assistants, did not earn enough to live independently. They earned between 12 and 20 pounds a year. So to survive, they needed to combine their income with other people. Told you, £1 a week was a kind of safe thing. That is why entire families, including children, had to work to add to the family budget. And poor people very rarely lived alone. Even middle class people very rarely lived alone. Because it was cheaper and safer and more convenient and all other things to share the budget with somebody else. Farm workers, £25 a year. Skilled domestic servants in big houses mostly, seamen, construction workers, around £45. So highly skilled mechanics and artisans between 150 and 300 pounds a year. This was enough for a very modest living of a family. So if this, let's say, highly skilled artisan earned as much, he could support other people, and this is normally what they would do. Most of the middle class, doctors, barristers, solicitors, clerks, senior civil servants, they would earn between 300 and 800 pounds a year. Of course, if you were a lower middle class clerk, teacher, journalist, shopkeeper, you would be closer to 300. If you were in the upper middle class, you might be closer to 800, with some exceptions going even higher, like the most successful businessmen or lawyers, doctors. The landed gentry, so the upper class, really started from 10,000. This meant you had definitely a large house with non-working wife, with a staff of servants, and you could enjoy the life to the fullest. The wealthiest aristocrats, as Sally Mitchell puts it, could earn as much as £30,000 a year, £30,000, which was enough to have an estate, usually a big palace on the big grounds, plus a palace or another big home in London, because normally these would be titled aristocrats, and they would have certain duties, like the head of the household would sit in the House of Lords. So then the entire family would move to London for the parliamentary season. So that's very brief introduction to the social classes, something that will really come up many times here. Read this chapter. This is chapter 2, so you'll have more information. Watch the short films from the British Library, and see you next week. Thank you.